Hi, Bill.
Hi.
We're it so far. I know more have agreed to be here, so.
Okay.
In fact, I heard back from basically everyone except one person. So hopefully they'll be joining soon.
Okay. Yeah, I had to go back to when you originally sent the note to come up with the Zoom address. And
yeah, I know it's kind of goofy. What it does is it automatically puts it on your calendar. So if you go to your calendar and click on the link, it'll get you there. But not everybody knows to do that. So they always want to go back and look for the initial meeting, which is fine. I mean, there's more than one ways to get there. So, but right now you and I are it. In fact, I was
old-fashioned calendar where you write in.
I'm sorry?
No, I have an old-fashioned calendar where you write in little.
Actually, I use both. I use electronic and paper because I am a visual person as well. And I need to have that, like, in fact, I have it right here and I reference it like every day. So I write on it, but I do it electronically too. So.
Good.
Hi, Lorraine.
Hello.
We are it, but I know I was telling Bill, I heard back from virtually everybody but one, and everybody agreed. So I think we just have a few people not here yet. It's a couple minutes early anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Really, who we need is Andy, because he's the big
He's
show
the presenter,
today.
the main guy.
Exactly. He's got the PowerPoint and everything. I am nothing but Zoom support staff.
Okay.
He's been working very hard on this and made significant progress. So we owe a big thank you to him.
Yeah, he's done this before with PowerPoints. He does a very good job. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really is his wheelhouse. I mean, he is getting his PhD right now, and part of his dissertation deals not specifically with, hi Melanie, doesn't deal maybe specifically with our project sort of, but it does. So he's kind of doing it as part of his schoolwork as well as helping us in the city for free.
Oh, I didn't realize he connects into
he's getting his dissertation on this greenhouse gas inventory work. So that's why he's been so willing to help us, I think.
That's ideal. Good.
All right, now we've got a lot of people joining.
Hello.
Hello, Andrew.
Hey, how you doing?
Andy, I'm glad you're here because I was just saying you're the big one today for the show. I'm just Zoom support staff.
Great. Yeah, I was just having a little difficulty getting in. Yeah.
That's okay. It's actually just 3 o'clock now, so we're good. I think actually we have everybody except for Judy. And one more.
I didn't see Lorraine on. I saw her a little bit ago, but
Lorraine was here. Oh, we lost her. I don't know where she went.
Maybe
you're right, Bill. She disappeared. We'll give it a couple more minutes. We have 6 on now, but there's 2 or 3 that said they were coming, and then Lorraine can get back on. Here we go. Judy's is there. Oh, and Lorraine. Here we go.
Oh, there's Judy. Okay, good.
Okay, yep. We got Lorraine back and Judy's connecting. I think there's maybe one other person that said they were a maybe and might be joining, but we have basically everyone. So Andy, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go forward with the presentation. And I'll just keep monitoring the waiting room. I'm going to mute myself. So Andy, I'm going to let you take over if that's okay.
Okay, that's okay with me.
Okay.
Let me turn my video on. Okay, so hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Lorraine.
How are
you doing? Great. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second here. I'm just going to share my screen. And we should be good to go. Okay, I'm going to minimize this. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. So for today, I'm just going to be going over work that we've done so far on the Kent Climate Action Plan. So this presentation is to be done together with Bridget, who has been facilitating everything and coordinating all the efforts on our end. And so I'll go straight into the presentation then. Okay, so just to touch base with everyone on, just in a nutshell, what this whole climate action plan is about. One, it's going to encompass all these steps that come together to form what the climate action plan is. So we're looking at an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions, an adoption of a reduction target based on the emission results that we'll be getting. And then we develop a climate action plan. And here, this is where we create an adaptation and a mitigation plan, okay? And so this is step 3 will be where we conduct a vulnerability assessment and get to know all our exposures, all our risks, all our potential soft and hard strategies that we could put together to adapt to climate change within the local context, or if we need a mitigation plan, in which at this point we factor in both into that plan that will be created in step 3. And so that's where we'll be putting in measures to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, okay? And then step 4 is where we implement our policies based on our findings from step 3, based on our findings from step 1, based on what we are proposing in step 2. So this is where all the policies get fashioned out. And then step 5 is where we monitor and track progress. And step 6, we recognize achievement. Okay, so I'm going to go into the work that has been done so far for each of the major models that we have here. Okay, and so inventory of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this is the first module, and we've done quite some great work on that. And so in a minute, I'll be going into the data itself, the emissions that have been estimated, for which sectors and what the findings are, and what the key sources are, in all of that. So for greenhouse gas emissions, we started by identifying the institutions and data required. We gathered initial inventory estimates and initiated a documentation and archiving. Okay, and then we went ahead to determine the methodology that will be used, and the standard inventory calculation or the formula per IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a body of experts, climate experts globally. And of course, if this climate action plan is going to be in support of the Paris Climate Accord, then we're looking at a more broader body in terms of meeting a certain set of requirements and methodology, more for standardization purposes. So we went ahead and did that. We defined our boundaries, identified the base and inventory years, and we began with the emission calculations and the text sections completion and all of that. And then what we'll be doing subsequently is, the QA/QC section, where we'll go over the data and look at everything that we calculated by way of estimates, and then we can begin to, fine tune things here on our end, and then that's when it goes into our report. So, to date, these are the sectors that we've conducted emissions for. Okay, so we have the water and wastewater sector. We have the AFOLU, agricultural, forestry, and land use. We have the transportation and mobile sources, commercial energy, solid waste, residential energy. Now, if you recall, for ICLEI ClearPath Pro, now, for those who don't remember, or it's been many years since we started this process. So the software we are using is the ICLEI ClearPath Pro. ICLEI stands for International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. So we're using the ClearPath Pro, and it has sectors, that we are supposed to gather data for and then estimate emissions from these sectors, where we have the activity data and the emission factors. Now, emissions is a product of activity data and then emission factors. So what we have here is all the activity data from the various sectors and the emission factors per the GPC, which is the Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emissions Estimation. So we have these sectors. Now, when you look closely, you realize that we have commercial energy, residential energy, because in the ClearPath Pro, and this is where I bring up, ICLEI's ClearPath Pro and how it has structured its sectors. So for this, it broke down the energy sector into three. So commercial energy, residential energy, and then industrial energy. We are in the process of estimating the emissions from the industrial energy sector as well. So, but for now, these are the sectors that have been completed. Let me mention that for sectors that don't show up currently here, and quite a few of them, just maybe 3 in total, including the fugitive emissions and all of that, is because of the availability of data that goes into the software and the challenges that we've had in the past, which some of you are familiar with when it comes to estimating emissions from there. So this is the chart. What I'm going to do right now is to go into the ClearPath Pro for you to look at the measures, okay? Because for time constraints and a whole lot of things I've been working on. I just came out of the meeting, so if you sense that I'm rushing a little bit, please bear with me. That's why, and I have another meeting coming up. It's been quite hectic going to the close of the year, but I'm going to go into the software so we look at the graphs itself, because I couldn't pull all of those here because it's going to take time. Let me go into the software at this point, and I have it open here. So I'm going to go into, now I'm sure everybody can see my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, so this is the ClearPath Pro software. So when you look at all the sectors that have been calculated so far, so this is the inventory records for, let me toggle this. It's right. This is all of you, the videos here. Let me minimize it. I can't see my screen clearly. Okay. All right, good. Okay, so this is inventory records from the residential energy sector. So when you look closely, you'll find residential energy, stationary fuel combustion. Okay, so when you look at stationary fuel combustion, this is it right here. And in the software, which all of this information is going to go into our report. But like I said, I couldn't pull them out and write out all the metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent here. But thankfully, we can go into the software, so you can see it right here. So residential energy, stationary fuel combustion, you see the CO2 equivalent and 8,334 metric tons. And then when you look at the grid electricity, all under residential energy, you see the carbon dioxide equivalent, which is 34,856 metric tons. So we see the various sectors and subsectors calculated, and we see all the breakdowns and all of that, which goes into it. Now, this is the graph I just showed you in my PowerPoint. Like I said, I mean, typically I'll just pull out all this information, right? Residential energy, the metric tons and all of that, and then create graphs for that. But I believe that's what we're going to do for our reports. So for time constraints and all of that, didn't put that in the PowerPoint. But here we can look at all the sectors that have been calculated so far and their share, in terms of key source. Because when you look at it from here, you can clearly see that residential energy is it's a key source of emissions that the city of Kent will have to deal with, when it comes to the adoption of the targets and the implementation or the setting of policies and implementation. So residential energy definitely is the key source here. And we see transportation. And for the transportation sector, currently what is showing is from the public transit. Okay, so public transit emissions that brings transportation sector to this match. Now, there are other sectors like the individual commute. So this is just public transit. You have the individual commutes and all of that, which I'm working with AMAS to get some very good data. I think since we have a regional body here, it will be beneficial to the group to try and nail down some numbers from there. Here I wouldn't want to use the regional data because key source, if you're thinking key source, transportation and energy is definitely what most urban areas show. So I want to get to the the minutest detail of this and get some hard numbers that are more accurate than we'll get at the regional level. So let me mention again that what is showing here is transportation and mobile sources sector, public transit. That's what is showing now. If that public transit alone is giving us 1,570 metric tons, that tells you that once we have the other subsectors factored in, I expect, having done urban and national greenhouse gas emissions, I know transportation sector should be more. So I'm expecting the graph to change quite drastically. But I go ahead at this point to also talk about solid waste and water and wastewater as well. Now, AFOLU, which is agricultural, forestry, and land use. And let me mention this. At some point, I'm going to pause, and then I'm going to allow everyone to come in and if there are questions and all of that, that we can address that. Okay, because I sense that I'm moving quite fast, so please bear with me. So AFOLU sector, this is the agriculture, forestry, and land use sector. And to estimate that, one of the things that I did, and I think I brought that up at one of our meetings. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the software and then have everyone look at some of the things that we've been working on. Let me minimize this. I'm going to another one. Okay, so this is just logged into a remote computer from here. So this map here is the city of Kent, okay? And here, I mentioned some time back that the software asks that you put in information for the agriculture, forestry, and land use, specifically what is the name of the sector again? I can go into the software. Let me go into the software from here. I have a lot showing on my screen. So okay, so when I go into the software again, where's the software from here? Let me toggle this again. All right, so this is the software. So when you go into AFOLU, okay, so this is AFOLU emissions and removals from forests. So this sector, to estimate the emissions from there, the software was requiring that we break down all the land cover classes in the city into some specific categories. Okay, so to do that, I used the land change modeler in a software called Terset. Okay, so first of all, this is the ARC map. For those of you who are familiar with it, I looked at data from the National Land Cover data set, okay, NLCD data. So this is data that has been collected at regional scale, national scale, where it looks at all the land cover classes within the city, and then it categorizes them based on a certain classification that it has. Now I went ahead and recategorized all of these data. So for instance, if I take this off, with showing blank, everything blank here, and you look at Kent, okay, this is land cover 2006. Okay, it's going to show you settlement, which is the almost purple, some might say, yeah, maybe fuchsia, I don't know. I know my colors. So you see that color over here, this is settlement, is dominant, okay? So we see wetlands, we see cropland, we see forest, all of that. So all of this data, okay, I had it for 2006, I had it also for 2016, okay? So this is settlement also showing in the dark color over there. So I did this because I wanted to know what are the changes in land cover classes, because for agriculture, forestry, and land use, they require this data input. Okay, so I had to categorize them into forest, grassland, cropland, wetland, and then settlement. Okay, now in this software called the land change modeler, I'm able to tell what the gains and losses by category are. So between 2006 and 2016, what were the changes? Okay, so for instance, if I look at settlement, it doesn't look like settlement lost any acreage. And I have it set here, if you're looking at my cursor, it says unit acres. Now, if you're a little lost as to why we needed to estimate all of this, remember that for carbon storage, carbon sequestration, land use, land cover is very critical when it comes to the emissions that come from this sector. So it's important to know what has been lost, what has been gained, what the acreages are to feed it into the software. Now, I think Harrison, Bridget, and I don't know if there was another person, met with ICLEI because their software, though it requires all of this data, they didn't have a methodology in place for us to use to estimate all these breakdowns and all this data going in. So this was my proposal to ICLEI. This is a sure way that I believe cities could take advantage of, and it's going to be published sometime soon. But you see all the method in there, the methodology, all the breakdowns in there, because for most cities at this point, though this sector holds a key when it comes to reducing emissions trapped in the air through carbon storage and sequestration, most people don't have the methodology in place or the skill to complete this section of their emissions, because all most cities are doing is emissions by sources. Okay, but then when it comes to removal by sinks, where the tree and the urban canopy resource is critical, most cities don't have the capacity to do that. And so this is something that we'll be mentioning, as a highlight of our climate action plan as well, where we've come up with a very good method that can estimate all of this, and then cities can adopt them accordingly. But here we see all the gains and losses by category. You could create a whole lot of graphs. It will tell you a lot, from here, the net category by net change by category. So settlement was just gaining. And when I put it on it, you see 421 acres gain from 2006 to 2016. And then all of that. You can also map them accordingly. I just tried to map, let me turn this off. I just mapped forest to all. So forest class, okay, which is the urban tree canopy, to all the other categories. We see that's the change from forest to all the other categories. We see it in these main segments of the city. But then you can run all the analysis, you can do the map changes. Like I said here, you could map the exchanges between grassland and all of that. So I'm going to leave it at this point and get into the emissions, and then we progress from there. So let me switch back out of my remote session here. Okay. And then let's see. Okay. So those are all the sectors that have been calculated to date, and then those numbers and all of that. Now, let me emphasize that the decision was reached not to wait until we have completed the inventory of greenhouse gas emissions to move on with work on the other sectors. But you and I can tell that this is the base, because this gives us a lot of numbers to work with. But then the data, working through the data has been a little challenging because we didn't get real good data, and so we have to count on modeling and a lot of regional data and modeling them, creating our own data sets using other software like we saw in the case of AFOLU. So that is for that. Now, the adoption of the reduction target, there are two methods that we are proposing, because we see it to be easily adaptable and quite suited for the steady area in the city of Kent that we have on our hands. And so presently, from the initial estimates, we see the key sources, we see the numbers and all of that. Now, as we complete the inventory, we're going to see a much more clearer picture. But I just wanted to also mention that once this is done, because the phase 1 and phase 2 are very related, that's the inventory, and then the adoption of the reduction targets, because you can't just propose a reduction target when you don't have a baseline to work off. Okay, so that's why this information is very critical, the inventory. But then the two methods that we are proposing is the fixed level goals, okay, which represent a reduction in emissions to an absolute emissions level in target year. Okay, so based on the estimates that we get for the year of the review, we want to consider these two main methods for the adoption of the reduction targets, okay, where we are setting a goal level, okay, based on our regional emission targets that have been set by other people within our region, okay, and then also we want to see what is applicable, what is the, well, because we want to do an apple-to-apple comparison, okay, so we want to see which cities in our region or even outside of our region slightly. We want to go out a little bit, you're not getting something very close to the city of Kent being a college town and all of that. And then we want to have a level set, okay, a reduction target set based on that, based on the emissions we're getting. Most cities and the nation, so you adopt these. So you hear, for instance, zero carbon, or you want to reduce it by 1990 levels, or you want to say reduce it by 10% and all of that. But you can't just throw the numbers up. At least you have to be looking at something to be able to determine what goal is very applicable and realistic for your city. So we want to look at these two fixed level goals and then base year intensity goals, okay, which represent a reduction in emission intensity relative to an emission intensity level in a historical base year. Okay, so this is based off on GDP, population, energy use, and all of that. And if you ask me, and I'll just throw it out there, I have my biases when it comes to these things. But this is for the review of the committee as we go ahead. But given that the city is a college town, okay, we know all the dynamics that go with population and energy use, and even if you like GDP, because we know when school is in session, a lot of things change. And so this is heavily impacted by some of these metrics. So, you know, it's very important to consider a base year intensity goal setting strategy, you know, which looks at all the population and the energy use fluxes and GDP fluxes and all of that. So if you ask me, this is my preferred, but this is something that I'll bring up later down the line for the committee to make some input on that. So just wanted to throw these ones out there, at least for now. And then, you know, when we reconvene, we'll definitely take a look at some of these. But I'm going to go into the next phase that we've been working on. This is where we're developing the climate adaptation and mitigation plan. Okay, so here we're doing the climate vulnerability assessment. Okay, now the first step that we have done, you know, to date, and I'm sorry, what is showing here? Let me go back here. Okay, I think I moved this, so I have it sitting on it. So just please bear with me. But this is because it's not supposed to be on top. Okay, all right. So this is Kent, Ohio, Portage County, average daily max temperature. Okay, so here, using the Climate Explorer tool, which is widely used at this scale by a lot of cities by this scale, we wanted to investigate what the regional climate is looking like. Okay, and to do that, we had to consult authoritative information, you know, as to what the projections are. What should we expect in terms of temperature and then precipitation, which are the major climate indices that we typically will use in this Climate Explorer tool. Okay, so for that, this one shows you two emission scenarios. Okay, so we have a low emission scenario and a high emission scenario. And I think I had some, let me go back out. I had some information on what the emission scenarios are. Maybe I didn't get it. But okay, I could tell you that in a second. All right, so let me have this showing. Five, maybe it's going to go back. Okay, so there are two emission scenarios we're looking at here. The high emission scenario and the low emission scenario. Now, there's a standard definition for the emission scenario, the low emission scenario, and the high emission scenario as well. But typically, or generally, what they refer to is in the low emission scenario, you're looking at where emissions generally stabilize, and then until a point, it begins to decrease. Okay, that is when we are implementing policies and based on the time that we are projecting into, we can say these policies are going to kick in. And so we expect that there will be less emissions from all the sectors that we have under review. Okay. And then based on that, the climate indices will change. Okay. So, and then a high emission scenario is where emissions continue to go high and higher and higher and increase without any reduction or any mitigation anywhere. So when you look at these, I mean, it tells you what we are going to expect in terms of average daily temperature for the city of Kent. Okay, so I looked at both scenarios and what generally they're going to look like. But I'll go ahead and show you also, the number of days with maximum temperature exceeding 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so when you look there, both scenarios as well. Okay, you see low emission and then high emissions, and then if you look at 2035, which was my near-term emission, the forecast year.
Andy, if I could interject for just 1 minute, we have a Zoom account, but somebody from the city must have set up a different meeting. It's telling me that this will end in 10 minutes. If that happens, everybody just log back in, okay? If this turns off, I put it as me as the leader, but it's giving me a warning. So if for some reason I'll lose this in 10 minutes, please just log in using that same Zoom connection. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, so days with a max temperature exceeding 95 degrees, this is what we're looking at. There's going to be an increase. 2035, we're going to see more of that. The projections, okay, and then total precipitation. Now, this is when you look closely at this, you see that this is quite sporadic compared to the temperature graphs, because you see with the temperature, we see quite a steady rise. You see it moving in a particular direction. You could put a trend line easily. But when it comes to precipitation, it means what this means is that there's going to be a lot of flash flooding, as we go into the years, because it's going to be sporadic, highly unpredictable. Now, what compounds the effect of all of this when it comes to vulnerability is how we have the built environment structured. Okay, so whether they are more impervious surfaces compared to urban tree canopy, grassland, all of that. And then where you have your hotspots, okay, or the slope is steeper, where you have high drainage density. If you break it by neighborhoods or break it by block groups, you're going to have all of these. And these indices here compound just the effect that we have over there when it comes to how we structured the urban landscape. Okay, so total precipitation, this is what it's looking like. Now, when you look at days with 2 inch, in excess of 2 inch precipitation, we see this graph here. You see it's quite sporadic in the beginning, but as the years progress, you see that it's going to be higher. Okay, we're going to have more of that. So this is just something for us to know in terms of modeling the regional climate, because like I said, if you go back here, and this is where I'll talk about this, chart or this schema that I have here. This is from an assessment I did recently for Yuba City, California, for their urban forestry vulnerability assessment. And these were the factors that were looked at. Now, I'll be using a similar approach because the formulas are the same. But then this is for the urban forestry resource or the asset. Okay. Let me mention here also that we talked about assets because we wanted to know what are the identifiable assets within the city of Kent, and if we are going to be vulnerable to climate change. which ones will be impacted the most, okay? Based on their exposure, based on where they are located, based on the, all these factors that we have there. So I'll go into this briefly here. And this is the same thing I'm doing for the assets that we listed from our past meetings, okay? So we're looking at the impact factors, which you see over there, okay? So that is where we have the human influence, okay? So the impact factors here are the sensitivity factors and then exposure factors, okay? So the sensitivity has to do with how humans have modified the urban landscape and how it predisposes it to climate impact. Okay, so this is where the number of impervious surfaces exceeding urban tree canopy and all of that creates urban heat island. It also shows in the drainage density, and like I mentioned, we'll have it by neighborhoods, so we can tell which neighborhood is most vulnerable. But then we'll look at the slope, look at the soil, and this is where it's showing over there. Slope, soil, and then the proximity to water body as factors to determine the impact of the climate incidents that we anticipate will hit in the city of Kent now, or the region at large. Then also we'll look at the adaptive factors, which are essentially the factors that build resilience to climate impact. So in the case of urban forestry, which is top, for not to say that, of course, humans are at the top of the ladder, when it comes to assets. But then I mentioned urban forestry because this is very critical when it comes to reducing the stock of carbon and all of that in the atmosphere, okay? All those gases that trap and emit heat, which we call greenhouse gases. So if we are to moderate the impact of climate change, then definitely the tree resource is something that is key to all our efforts. And so in the case of that, I mean, this is the next thing I'm going to be doing because I have the tree data, tree canopy data now based on the NLCD, which you saw. I have all the forest, which is urban forest. So the next step is to conduct the vulnerability based on the slope, the soil, the urban heat island, drainage density, all of that. But then most importantly, looking at the adaptive factors, which has to do with the socioeconomic, the organizational, and the biological. So if I'm looking at trees, biological will be tree health. But then if I'm looking at human life, the biological will be people who have, pre-existing conditions. I'm going to look at the demographic data. I'm going to look at where you have most people below a certain income bracket. They constitute the bulk of our most vulnerable, in terms of mobility, adaptation, having resources available to do something when a climate incident hits. We're looking at all of these factors when it comes to the adaptive factors. So this is just in a nutshell, but then if you look beneath that, you see the vulnerability where adaptive capacity minus impact, and impact equals exposure, sensitivity, and all of that, okay? And then of course, the lower and high emission scenarios, temperature, precipitation, you see all those numbers that go into that. I'm gonna move ahead. I think I talked about this already. But I think we can hit the 10 minutes, right, before we switch. That'll be a good place to pause, and then we can go ahead. So at the end of all phase 1, phase 2, and then of course the modeling of the climate, the regional climate, and the vulnerability, then we go into the next one, which I won't talk about that because that's something we're going to get into. I just wanted to show, all the work that has been done so far. And then I'll pause here for questions. But I think, Bridget, would it be a good time to exit and come back in since you're running out?
Yeah, I reached out to the clerk of council and I didn't get a reply back. So I think it is going to end the meeting. So if everyone logs out right now and logs back into the link, we should be okay.
Okay.
Can you do that?
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to do that.
I'm going to
too.
end the meeting and everybody just log back in.
Okay, great.